Great. Thank you so much, Stacy, for having me. I'm so deeply sorry I wasn't able to join you guys in person today. But unfortunately, I injured my right knee and the driving was not great. So we're resting, icing, and elevating today. But as you may have already heard from Stacy's introduction, I am the founder and executive director of SoCal Sea Turtles, Inc. And we are a nonprofit organization that I founded in 2016 because of results that I found in my master's research. And we will have a few slides about that later. But for now, I wanted to give you all a brief introduction to the species of sea turtles that you are most commonly going to encounter here in Southern California. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about sea turtles in the Orange County area as well. So this is a beautiful photo by Ralph Pace, who was a local photographer. He's since moved north, but you can see this is in La Jolla Cove down here in San Diego, and it's one of our magnificent East Pacific green sea turtles and a cute little harbor seal. And I think this picture says 1,000 words about the kinds of wonderful wildlife that we can see just off of our shores here in Southern California. And of course, California's state marine reptile is none other than the critically endangered Pacific leatherback sea turtle. These turtles are the largest sea turtles in the ocean, reaching up to 1,200 pounds and up to 9.5 feet long. And they are also the most ancient sea turtle species and genetically the closest relatives to Archelon, which was the first true sea turtle in the planet's history. And because they are such an ancient turtle, they have a body plan more similar to Archelon than to our more modern hard-shelled turtles. So you can see they have this leathery back covered in this beautiful star pattern, very similar to what we see in our whale sharks. And their carapace, while it does have some bony structure, is covered in this thick leathery skin. And these animals, because of their huge body size, are able to withstand freezing cold temperatures. And in the Atlantic, they feed in Nova Scotia. And here in the West Coast, they feed in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, but we do every once in a while see a leatherback sea turtle passing through Southern California on the way to their breeding grounds and nesting beaches all the way in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Fiji, and the other South Pacific islands. This is one of the longest migrations of any animal on the planet, including marine mammals and seabirds as well. And I'm sure you guys have already connected the dots as to why this species is so critically endangered, because of course, right in the center of their migration route is our Great Pacific Garbage Patch and Great Pacific Gyre, as well as all of the various fisheries operating from around the globe, some with observers on deck and strict instructions not to have sea turtle bycatch like those from the United States, and others such as the IUU, or illegal unregulated fisheries that don't have any oversight, and who knows what they're doing with their bycaught sea turtles. So this is a top conservation priority in our Pacific region, and was one of the largest reasons for the closure of the drift gillnet fishery in Northern California, because they were catching way too many of these leatherback turtles, as well as marine mammals and birds. And so it's unfortunate for those fishers that their livelihoods had to change so dramatically. But these animals are so critically endangered, we really can't afford to lose even one more. And now for a happier story. Mexico's most common reptile is the olive Ridley sea turtle. These guys are famous for this image that you see below. This behavior is called an arribada, also known as an arrival. And between a few hundred to many thousands of olive ridley turtles will all exit the ocean, usually in relation to the full moon, and nest en masse. And olive ridley turtles and then their itty bitty cousins in the Atlantic and Caribbean, the Kemp's ridley turtles, are the only two species on the planet that do mass nesting. All other species nest singly at night. And we think that this is a behavioral adaptation, especially for smaller, less experienced females to nest in great numbers. Because as you know, even if there are predators on the beach, if you have hundreds of thousands of eggs, then it's impossible for the predators to eat every one. And recent research suggests that that hypothesis is indeed the truth, because olive ridley females can also nest singly at night like all the other sea turtle species, and those individuals tend to be a bit larger and more robust, and probably older and more experienced nesters as well. And our olive ridleys are found all across the globe. They are one of the most common sea turtle species worldwide as well. And although they are most commonly seen here on the West Coast, in Southern California and Mexico, we do sometimes see individuals up north as far as Alaska. And these are the turtles that you will often see cold stunning, because olive ridleys are the second smallest species of sea turtle, adults reaching a pretty adorable weight of up to only 150 pounds. And because of that small body size in relation to all the other species of sea turtles, they're more likely to cold stun because they don't have as much fat to insulate their body, and of course their little muscles are not creating as much heat when they're moving through the water as our larger bodied animals do. And these guys are not critically endangered. I believe they were downlisted pretty recently in the last few years to threatened in our region on the west coast of the US and Mexico. And now we have our loggerhead sea turtles, which, although they are very common on the East Coast, here on the West Coast, we tend to only see them periodically, especially offshore in the months of June, July, and August, because this is when the little turtles are making their journeys from their breeding grounds back to their foraging grounds in Southern California and Mexico. And in this photo, you'll see one of my great mentors and good friends, Dr. Jeff Seminoff on the left, and Dr. Tomo Oguchi on the right, both of whom work at the Southwest Fisheries Science Center in La Jolla. And they, along with a great team of biologists from all over the world, have been tracking have been tracking loggerhead movements across the Pacific since the 1990s, when this tracking technology was able to be sized at a small enough size to not encumber these little juvenile turtles' movements through the ocean. And you can see this guy has a little tag on his back, and he is about to embark on a grand journey, not down to Mexico, as was previously hypothesized, but all the way across the ocean to nesting beaches in Japan. And in the past 2 or 3 years, even more recent research has shown that, unlike other sea turtles like our leatherbacks that will return to their nesting beaches about once every 4 years to nest and breed, these loggerhead turtles actually make one journey all the way across the Pacific to Southern California and Mexico. And then when they are ready to start breeding, they go back to Asia and stay there for the rest of their lives. And so they're only making one single migration to their feeding grounds and then another migration back to their breeding grounds, which is really uncharacteristic of a migratory species and something that is now of great interest to our scientific community. Year round in Southern California, we have my personal favorite sea turtle species, our green sea turtles, and they are the largest of the hard shell sea turtles, tipping the scales at over 500 pounds down here in San Diego, and individuals up in Orange County and LA being closer to that 150 to 300 pound mark, because those are younger animals and probably a newer population as these turtles continue to rebound. Their carapace shell length is 3 to 5 feet long. And so counting our flippers and our head, we're looking at about a 6-foot animal. And so these are really incredible to see in the water. If you are a snorkeler, I encourage you to jump in the water with these guys because it's a pretty incredible experience. And they, of course, love to eat seagrasses. And so they like to be mostly in shallow water where the sunlight can penetrate to the bottom and get all this nice vegetation growth. They also eat red and green algae, however, and so they will sometimes venture down into the depths past, the really bright photic zone. But they're really hanging out in our bays, our estuaries, our harbors, and then in the open ocean, really close to shore. And general green sea turtle facts we've gone over. They are the largest of all the hard-shelled turtles, but probably because of their very much vegetarian diet, they're the only species of sea turtle that does eat vegetation. They have a very small head and a little round beak compared to their huge body size. And so even though loggerhead turtles are smaller than green sea turtles, their head is almost 3 times the size of a little green sea turtle's head. And their lifespan that we know of is probably about 80 years. The oldest individuals that have been aged using skeletochronology by the Southwest Fisheries Science Center here in La Jolla have been in kind of the 50 to 60 year range, but at least on the Atlantic side, we have had turtles return to those nesting beaches that were tagged as juveniles in their 80s. And so they certainly are a long-lived species, although probably not quite as long-lived as our pokey land tortoises, because they have a bit of a faster paced lifestyle when they're in the water. And sexual maturity for green turtles is the latest of all the species. We used to think their sexual maturity happened between the ages of 35 and 45, but recent research and improved aging techniques has now identified that here on the Eastern Pacific, we have some turtles as young as 25 years old nesting on the Michoacan Peninsula, which we thought was not typical, but now we're changing our tune, and we think that probably sexual maturity here in the Pacific Ocean is between probably 25 to 40 years old. And they're breeding and nesting grounds for all sea turtle species, except for the Hawaiian green turtles, because they're kind of marooned. They're a non-migratory population, but all other sea turtles want to nest right on the equator. So no sea turtle species nests in California, in spite of what some of our misguided news publications have been saying in the past year or so for some reason. So that's not true. They are not nesting here. They are going much, much further south to get that nice warm water and the sand temperature that they like for their eggs, which is between 82 to 84 degrees 24 hours a day. So our green sea turtle feeding is very different depending on population. Almost all green turtles across the globe are completely herbivorous as adults, feeding primarily on seagrasses and red and green algae species, like this big fat female turtle who looks like she's from Florida or the Caribbean, judging by her pale white skin. And I can tell she's a female because she's terribly fat, so she's probably on her way to go lay some eggs. You can see how rotund she is here in this photo. And this vegetarian diet, of course, is what gave them their name, the green sea turtle. I'm sure you all have noticed in these pictures, these turtles are not green. They are various shades of black and brown and tan. But because in Florida, especially, and in the Caribbean region, they eat almost 100% green diet. Their fat is green. And so the Key West turtle soup that was very famous in the 1920s through 1973 was a green color because it is made from this fat. And green sea turtles were ranched or farmed in the United States until they were added to the very first edition of the Endangered Species Act in 1973. And this action saved them from near extinction in the late 1960s, around 1968. The late great Dr. Archie Carr hypothesized that the green sea turtle would be extinct in the United States in the next few generations if they were not protected from this harvest that fed appetites all over the globe, unfortunately. And what people would do is they would go out and catch undersized kind of young juvenile green turtles and then feed them a high fat, high protein diet in the turtle crawls or pens down in the Florida Keys, and then slaughter them and ship the meat all over the world for human consumption. And so this, of course, Endangered Species Act protection really changed the world for our green sea turtles. Hatchlings and young green sea turtles are kind of like Labradors. They will eat anything they can fit in their mouths. And so this is often the size class, kind of just around 100 pounds, that we see most frequently ingesting and getting entangled in plastic debris, and getting hooked by hook and line fishermen at, the OB Pier and every bridge and pier in Southern California in recent years, because they will chomp anything that they think might be edible, and without much thought to what's going in their mouths as juveniles. And they also really like invertebrates, unfortunately, just like squid, and a lot of fishers do like to use squid bait. And so this is a real attractant for young sea turtles. And so we ask hook and line fishermen that are fishing in areas with green sea turtles, which includes all nearshore waters in Southern California, please do not use squid bait. Fish bait and a circle hook is a much better way to ensure that you catch fish and not sea turtles. However, here in the East Pacific, our green sea turtles are very different than green sea turtles around the world, and they are eating about 50% animal protein, 30% seagrasses, and 20% red and green algae throughout their lives. And we think that this high protein diet allows them to attain a larger body size in a shorter period of time than the green turtles who live in warmer waters, like on the Atlantic side. And we think it is also probably an adaptation to having less access to seagrass, although our seagrass pastures now, from wonderful efforts by organizations like OC Habitats doing lots of restoration and reconfiguring things like channels and how we do mosquito management in wetlands areas, means that we are seeing more and more seagrass pasture available for green turtle grazing. And hopefully this is one more reason that our population is rebounding and doing so well right now. Green sea turtle nesting, although it does not happen here in Southern California, of course, our turtles that live here do nest. They go all the way down to the Revillagigedos archipelago in southern Mexico, as well as the Michoacan Peninsula. And you can tell that this big fat nesting female is from the East Pacific because she is Black. And that is why sometimes our turtles in Hawaii and in Mexico and California are called the Pacific black turtle, is because they are much darker in color, probably to help them absorb more of the sun's rays, and also have better camouflage in our dark waters here in the Pacific. And so when our ladies get all the way down to the beach and finally crawl up to lay their nests, they are quite prolific nesters. They lay more eggs than any other turtle species per nest. So our adults will return to the same beaches where they were born. Green sea turtles are the only sea turtle species that returns to the same nesting beach where they were born. So ignore the popular media that says that all sea turtles do that. That is not true. Many sea turtles are very flexible and will nest often in different countries depending on the year, but our green sea turtles are our OCD turtles, and they have to do the same thing all the time. And they have one grazing pasture, one foraging area that they really like, and they'll hang out there for the rest of their lives. And then when they have their nesting beach where they were born, they actually have a magnetic plate in their head similar to a lot of migratory birds, and they are following those magnetic field lines of the earth right back to the exact spot where they were born, which is very uncharacteristic of all other sea turtle species. So they're very special, in my mind at least. And our females will nest once every 2 weeks while they are at their natal beach, of course, depending on age, size, and fitness. And each female will lay an average of 5 nests or clutches per season, which means basically that each female could lay up to 675 eggs in one nesting season. And this leads us, of course, to the conclusion that our buffs, or our big old fertile females, are the most valuable animals to conserve. And so although it's important to try and save every hatchling, we know that fewer than 1 in 100 hatchlings will make it to be a buff. And so when we have these big ladies in our waters, like this girl here in San Diego Bay, who's all ready to go lay some eggs, you can tell because she's got that big bubble of fat poking out from under her armpits and also around her neck. She could be responsible for 675 brand new baby turtles every few years of her 80+ year lifespan. I guess we'll subtract 25 from that, but either way, they do a lot of work to keep the species going. And luckily, these green sea turtles spend most of their lives foraging right off the coast of Southern California. So their eggs will incubate for approximately 2 months. And as I just said, the hatchlings generally just get eaten as soon as they come out of the egg. And then if they make it to the ocean, they'll get eaten by fish there. So about 1 in 100 hatchlings will survive to reproductive age if we only factor in natural predation. And then if we factor in vessel collisions, entanglement and debris, ingestion of plastics, that number falls much lower, unfortunately. So Southern California's green sea turtles, San Diego has some of the largest green sea turtles ever recorded on the planet. Wrinklebutt was our largest individual. She was an enormous female, tipping the scales at over 550 pounds. Long Beach, LA, and Orange County turtles are generally smaller and younger than those found in San Diego County. And this is a really exciting development because we believe that this may be due to the rebound in our green turtles, since they were protected in the US in 1973, and then their nesting beaches were completely closed and protected by Mexico in 1992. We think a lot of these little turtles that we're seeing in Orange County and LA and Long Beach all the way up to Santa Barbara are products of that legislation, because they're just about that size of a 25 to 35-year-old turtle, which is really exciting to see. And we talked about before, in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, you'll see these very, very pretty, light, starbursty colored green turtles in that nice warm water. Probably also helps them to camouflage on that bright white sandy bottom. And interestingly enough, the only place on the planet where you can see both Atlantic and Pacific green sea turtles in the same place are the Galapagos Islands. And it's very funny to see these little yellow turtles and the big black turtles pestering each other and competing for seaweed there in the island. So if you haven't been to the Galapagos, go. The sea turtle action is amazing. Here in the East Pacific, a DPS is a distinct population segment. So back in the 1980s and 1990s, when I was younger, you might have heard people referring to subspecies of green sea turtles or subspecies of sea turtles. But now that our genetic techniques are a little bit more advanced, we know that these turtles all across the globe, all green sea turtles, no matter how different they look or behave, are one single species genetically. And so we account for this variation in size and color, diet, and attitude or lifestyle to being a distinct population segment. And so these are populations that are not interbreeding. And our DPS here on the East Pacific are nice and dark colored like their Hawaiian cousins, but while our Hawaiian green sea turtles tend to have really round carapaces or top shells, our green sea turtles here in the California and Mexican population have a heart-shaped carapace. So you can really tell when it's an East Pacific green sea turtle, as well as that really dark, almost black scutes or scales on their faces, and then much darker skin than our Atlantic individual here in this photo, Atlantic Caribbean. So as we said before, this might help them absorb more solar radiation when they're laying on top of the water with their flippers flipped up behind their back, sunbathing and basking. We get a lot of photos of that from our whale watching boats, as well as to camouflage them against our dark rocky habitats, because especially in the San Gabriel River and in San Diego Bay, you'll see them either kind of coming up out onto the rocks to forage on that nice seaweed that grows in the intertidal, or in the rocky habitat underwater. So they may also have evolved to be a darker color to camouflage against those types of habitats. And this is why our turtles are called the Pacific black turtle, and this is actually a Hawaiian sea turtle, but it does have a little bit of a divot in the carapace. And just this week, I attended a lecture with even more recent genetic findings that they have had a few individual Hawaiian green sea turtles found here in Southern California over the years, which is just incredible, as those are a non-migratory turtle. So there's still more to learn about how our sea turtle populations are interacting here in the Pacific. And of course, the reason that I am here today is because my master's thesis project at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in 2015 fell through. And I was not able to go to Madagascar and work with fishermen as I had originally planned, and I had to quickly scramble and get a project. And so I went out to see sea turtles being tagged, and had the great fortune of tagging Trey, the big green sea turtle, with Dr. Jeff Seminoff, who's there affixing the tag to Trey. And he was one of the first fully adult male sea turtles that we were able to tag, and kept his tag on long enough to really see where he was going. And you can tell he's a male because he's got this enormously long tail that he'll use to grab onto the back of a female's carapace during mating, so they don't get separated by the tides or the waves. And our female green sea turtles' tails are about the size of a human thumb and do not stick out past the carapace very much at all. So at this big adult size, 300 plus pounds, you can tell males from females pretty reliably from external sources. Anything smaller than about that size, you need to take a blood sample and measure the testosterone level in the blood to tell if it's a male or a female turtle. And so Trey was a gentleman enough to keep his tag on for long enough for us to track him all the way from San Diego Bay down to the Revillagigedos Islands in Mexico. And this was later corroborated by 4 more individual turtles who made the same journey. And we had also already done genetics work by the great Peter Dutton, who was also at our symposium this week. And he was able to identify, using genetic techniques, that our turtles in San Diego and Long Beach were definitely from this Revillagigedos Islands, and later we found out also the Michoacan Peninsula population. So of course, after learning about our green turtles when I was in graduate school, I also realized that I was a sea turtle biologist in the making and had no idea that there were sea turtles in Southern California. And I wanted to know if Californians knew more than I did. And so I went out to the docks and the beaches and the surf shops and the dive shops and interviewed about 110 water sports goers, boat owners, fishers, surfers, and divers, and found out that very few recreational anglers and boaters had any idea that we had sea turtles in Southern California. And the ones that knew that we had them were ones that had either accidentally caught them or seen them themselves. And so it was clear that there was almost no outreach and education in the state of California around sea turtles in comparison to some place like Florida, Alabama, all over the Southeast, where this is something that the Fish and Wildlife Service does. Because the sea turtles don't exit the water to nest here in California, they are under the jurisdiction of NOAA Fisheries because they were previously considered a fish because we fished for them up until 1973. And so they had no outreach and education at all, except for one program through Ocean Connectors, spearheaded by my great friend, Frances Kinney, and she had been doing education with sixth, seventh, and eighth graders on migratory species that migrated between Mexico and the US. And one year the kids studied green sea turtles, one year they studied terns, I think least terns, and then one year they studied gray whales. And so besides those sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, almost nobody knew we had sea turtles. But 16% of the recreational anglers and boaters that I spoke to had seen sea turtles around their boats, often in the dock before they'd even launched. And just, terrible rates for our divers and our kayakers. And so I knew that I had my job cut out for me, and that my master's thesis project would most likely become something that I did long after. And here we are 7 years later, and I'm still doing it. So the prediction was correct. And then, of course, NOAA had started a sea turtle sightings reporting hotline because they were seeing more and more sea turtle and human interaction. And so I had this question in my survey of, did you know that you could report sea turtle sightings? And only 26% of commercial anglers and boaters knew that you could report turtle sightings, and only 8% of the recreational anglers and boaters knew that they could report their sightings. And this is probably why in the beginning of the sightings hotline, we were getting a lot of reports from the same kind of handful of 5 people between Santa Barbara and San Diego. And then in terms of perceived threats to sea turtles, because sea turtles live all over the world and their threats are different in different parts of the world, there was not really a general consensus among anybody as to what the greatest threats to our sea turtles were. But interestingly enough, people in both the commercial and recreational portion of the survey put boat strike as actually the lowest priority danger to our sea turtles. When we look at the actual data of what is killing our sea turtles, we can see that boat collisions and jet ski collisions account for almost 100% of sea turtle mortality here in Southern California. And this is only 1 year of data that was, a few years of data, 2010 to 2016, that was released to me by NOAA Fisheries to use for my master's project. This year, my good friend and colleague, Robin at the Southwest Fisheries Science Center is releasing her study from 2014 to 2022 of mortality rates in green sea turtles in the Southern California area. And her data basically looks very much the same as this, but many, many more data points. And unfortunately, we really know that most of our sea turtles who are coming up stranded are stranding because they've either been hit by a hull or a jet ski or been sliced by a propeller. And then in a much fewer individuals are being hooked by fishers and unfortunately drowning in nets. And then, of course, we've seen the sad photos of some of the turtles that have become entangled, especially in derelict fishing gear and other marine debris. And people often ask, you see manatees and other marine mammals often with propeller scars on their backs who've survived. But unfortunately, when it comes to sea turtles, vessel strikes are almost always fatal. And this is because of their body plan that is designed to be light and hydrodynamic and move quickly through the water. And thus their carapace or shell is much thinner than what you would see on like a land tortoise. And it really is just a paper thin layer of bone in between their ribs with a little thin layer of keratin like our fingernails on top of that bone. And so when they are struck by a propeller or the hull of a boat, like the individual on top, you can see actually the paint from the white hull here and here on her carapace and all of these lovely eggs pouring out, unfortunately. And this individual who was sliced right above the lungs, their lungs or body cavity fill with water and they drown immediately. And so this is why it's really important that if you can see the shore and you're on a motorized vessel, that you create no wake at all. You want to be basically idling if you can see the shore and only go really fast once you are out of sight of land and in the deep ocean where you're less likely to encounter our sea turtles. And so this is really how you can help our green sea turtles and all of our sea turtle species here in California survive, is by obeying no wake zones. And if you can see the shore, go slow for sea turtles below. So anyone who's gone tearing around Fiesta Island or any of our bays, harbors, and estuaries in a jet ski and felt a bump, unfortunately, that may have been a sea turtle, because those are the areas that our green sea turtles spend the most time in, because that's where the veggies and snails that they like to eat live. So please, 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 we, all of us in the sea turtle community, are begging the general public to slow down to the speed of a canoe if you can, in a motorized vessel anywhere where you are in sight of the shore in Southern California. And then number two, we have this wonderful reporting mechanism that I made easier on my website, socalseaturtles.org. And so if you see a sea turtle anywhere in the state of California or all along the west coast of the US or Mexico, you can report that sighting at socalseaturtles.org or using this QR code. And we've also developed brochures and waterproof stickers that anyone who goes on the water frequently, surfers, divers, fishers, can get for free. We will ship them to you, and you can keep them with you. And that has both the Sea Turtle Stranding Hotline phone number, the VHF channel 16 to call the Coast Guard if you see a sea turtle that's injured, as well as this QR code to scan to fill out a brief form online if you see a live sea turtle. And you can see this map on socalseaturtles.org. And I have zoomed in here on your Orange County neighborhood, so you can see all the red sea turtles were sightings of dead stranded turtles that were responded to by the West Coast Sea Turtle and Marine Mammal Stranding Network. And then all of our little blue sea turtles are live turtles that were either reported by scientists or professional monitors, or the general public. And if you go on the website and click on each of these individual icons, you can actually see the date and time the sea turtle was seen, as well as its species if known and gender if known. And so it's really fun to hang out for a few hours and delve into the map and learn more about the individual turtles that we see here in Southern California. And I try to update this map monthly. I have not updated it since probably June or July. And so you can expect to see a lot more little turtle icons in the next coming weeks. So please check back. And then finally, the third most common cause of death for our sea turtles And certainly the most common cause of death for our little bitty turtles just starting to recolonize our bays, harbors, and estuaries is plastic ingestion and debris ingestion. And so if you see any non-biodegradable trash on, in, or near the water, please pick it up and put it in a covered trash receptacle, no matter who left it there, because you could be saving a sea turtle's life with each piece that you remove. And number 4, of course, because most people in Southern California have no idea that we even have sea turtles here at all, let alone the fact that they're in our nearshore waters every day of the year, all year round. Please go on SoCalSeaTurtles.org and order your free brochures and waterproof stickers and hand them out to anyone you know who spends time on, in, or near the water. I also have some wonderful sea turtle fans who have been slapping these stickers on the little line collection receptacles on piers. So if pier fishermen catch a turtle, then they know how to report it and how to get help. And also up on like bulletin boards at yacht clubs. And our sea turtle force is small but mighty. So please, if you'd like to join in our efforts, order some brochures and stickers. And if you want to get a lot of them and you're in an area that's close to where I'm doing a presentation, I will come and hand deliver them to you for free. And then, of course, we have our SoCal Sea Turtles Slow for Sea Turtles speed signs that are coated in specialty low light reflective material, so they can be seen around sunrise and sunset when we think most of our sea turtles are getting struck by vessels because they're less active. And we are urging anyone who has jurisdiction over a piece of waterfront property on a dock or a pier or a restaurant that has a waterfront view to please let us put up one of these signs at your establishment. And all that we ask is that you send us a photo of the sign out in the wild so we can show people where our signs are going up, and that if anything should happen to the sign, that you let us know so we can bring you another one or repair the one that you have for free. And then we also have the SoCal Sea Turtles t-shirts. 100% of the proceeds from the t-shirt sales go right back into supporting our outreach, education, and habitat restoration and cleanup efforts. So please, if you like this t-shirt design, I design everything myself. And we have even more designs through our Zazzle store, although there we only get 20% of the proceeds from the sale. And you can see I'm wearing one of our OC oil spill designs here today. So please check it out. All the proceeds go towards our sea turtles. My salary actually comes from my work as a marine biology consultant for various federal agencies and public and private institutions. So thank you so much to everyone who's contributed time and money and advice to making this project successful for the past 7 years. COVID was very, very hard for all the little nonprofits, especially those of us who really depend on in-person events to sustain our programs. And so thank you to everyone who helped us make it through COVID. We almost shut down, but we're still here. So thank you all so very much for your attention today. Once again, I apologize I can't be there in person to give you all stickers and brochures and hugs for coming out and listening to my talk. But please let me know if you have any questions about sea turtles, marine mammals, Indo-Pacific corals. I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
Just Moni close, just so she can hear you. Just the computer generally.
Okay. Hi, Sabrina. It's Nancy
Hi.
Caruso.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. I'm wondering, do you have an idea? Number one, I want to start with, I'm a diver. For 20 years, I've probably been in the water at least once a week for 20 years. I've never seen a sea turtle here. I've seen them in Catalina like twice.
Mhm.
And yeah, divers don't even know they're here because we don't get to see them either.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know how many, if you have any idea, how many resident, so to speak, I know they leave once they get to be sexually mature, but how many live here in Orange County?
We don't know that yet because the Orange County turtles are pretty new. We know that we have probably between 75 to 150 residents in San Diego Bay. We have about 7 to 8 juveniles who live in La Jolla Shores and La Jolla Cove. And they're there year round because they're not breeding. But the Orange County turtles are new and the LA County turtles are pretty new. And so that research is still being conducted, but certainly we can imagine that you have at least 100 individuals in any kind of bay, estuary, harbor type area that is relative in size to San Diego Bay. So we could use that as kind of a benchmark for now until the surveys are conducted for enough years that we have like a real idea of the estimated numbers. But in terms of looking for sea turtles, I would say get into those seagrass pastures or right along the rocks, which, as a fellow diver is pretty dangerous. But a nice calm area to see them is certainly an area known as Devil's Slide and Turtle Town here in La Jolla Cove off of the Marine Room dive site, or La Jolla Shores is Marine Room, and then also in the Cove. And you'll see those 7 or 8 little individual turtles that have called that place their foraging ground. And then in the bay, of course, the visibility is horrible. And the best places to see them are really close to the shore in those seagrass and kind of intertidal habitats, which is probably why, when you're diving in nice clear water, that's, 20 to 40 plus meters deep, you're not really going to see our sea turtles except for once in a while. And Catalina, of course, is an exception because they have an incredible amount of sea veggies for them to eat. And just the way the islands are constructed, that's the only place that I've seen a sea turtle underwater here in California was snorkeling and diving off of Catalina, but I'm getting back out to Devil's Slide as soon as my knee is figured out.
So second part of that question is, I know about the population in Alamitos Bay for the last 30 years. Are those residents? Do they ever leave? That was the second.
All of the green sea turtles are residents. And even those sea turtles in Los Alamitos Bay are, when we track them and tag them, going in and out of the bay. And so they're using the same channels that our vessels are using to get in and out of their foraging area. And I think also because they're eating invertebrates as well, that may be another reason why they might leave the bay to go forage in the open ocean and then return to the bay around sunset to bed down near shore where it's warm and protected.
Are they leaving for reproduction?
Yes, every once in a while. I believe our green sea turtles here, our females are going down to Mexico probably every 2 to 4 years. Once they reach sexual maturity to breed, and they'll hang out there for about 6 to 8 weeks. But the rest of the time they are here in Southern California. But we have seen some of our individual Southern California turtles all the way up in places like Alaska. And so we know they are going up and down the coast. And so while they do have a foraging home range that they really will tend to, like a little sea turtle farmer in a certain bay or estuary, there's no reason why they may not venture further north or to another habitat for an unknown reason to us. I'm sure they have their reasons, but we don't know why yet.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Like going to the court hearing.
Hi, I was wondering because I know that oftentimes sensitive plant and wildlife data and sightings are kind of not made available to the public for very good reasons. So I'm wondering if there's any concerns about the sea turtle sightings having that like location specific information, if there's any concerns about poaching or that information being used for the wrong purposes.
Luckily here in Southern California, that hasn't been such an issue. It doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. There was a period of time during the COVID pandemic when the San Gabriel River was not as closely monitored as it usually is. And the San Gabriel is kind of interesting because the sea turtles aggregate there in huge numbers all day, every day, and they forage off of the rocks in the intertidal. And so sometimes when the tide goes out, they appear to be stranded because they'll just be like laying on a cement block. Then when the tide comes back in, they waddle off their block and go back into the water. And usually we get reports of this from concerned members of the public, but unfortunately during that period of time when the river was not monitored during the COVID pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, pre-vaccine, when everything was on shutdown, there were a few isolated incidents of people seeing poachers going down and actually just walking down and picking up turtles and putting them into their trucks and driving off, and also some evidence of some bloody rocks. And so we think that there were a few isolated incidences during that time, but that's the only evidence of poaching that anyone on the west coast of the US has ever reported.
I have a question for you. I'm Nancy's husband, Tom. I've been
Hi,
riding
Tom.
hello. I've been riding my bike along the San Gabriel River channel for over 30 years. I used to play in there on a little Zodiac in my late teens, and
Yeah.
I've seen green sea turtles in there ever since. I'm
Mhm.
out there about 100+ days a year, so I see them every single day. How long have they been out in the San Gabriel River?
That's a really cool question because we thought it was pretty recent. And then at our Sea Turtle Symposium, George Balaj, who is the 80-year-old kind of grandfather of Hawaiian sea turtle biology, turns out wrote an article in one of the marine turtle journals in the late 1980s about finding sea turtles in the San Gabriel River. So now we know that they were there in the 80s and people just weren't studying or paying attention to them, or they didn't read the MTN, the Marine Turtle Newsletter.
I saw them in 88. That's when I recall seeing them first.
I think his article was like right around then, like 86 to 88. But you know, the
I take that back. It was 86.
86, very cool. So, you know, we think that green sea turtles lived all up and down the coast of California before they were hunted to near extinction. By 1968, they were almost completely gone from our coast. And so we think that as the population grows, they'll continue to recolonize their old habitat, which would be anywhere that you see vegetation growing out of the water and you have a high density of invertebrate life.
I have a question, Sabrina. So you're
Yeah.
talking about Stacy.
Hi,
You know, they're up and down our coast, and they're in Orange County and found in San Gabriel. Have you had any sightings near where we're at today, which is the Huntington Beach Wetlands Conservancy, which would be Talbot Marsh opening, right? Yeah. Or the Santa Ana River. Now I know the Santa Ana River is channelized, so it may not be ideal for them, but do we have any sightings in those areas?
I don't know, let's check. Here's our map. So there's Laguna, Corona, Newport, Huntington is there. And as I mentioned, I'm from New York. I moved here 7 years ago and have done nothing but think about sea turtles since. So anyone who has directions for me, let me know.
There are,
Yeah,
yeah.
right here.
There's
Awesome. It looks like they are. I'm just wondering, John, have you ever seen it inside the wetlands or heard anything like that? No.
We're also pretty shallow.
And then-
So, I mean, all we're gonna get is whatever the tide range is. So at low tide is some pretty shallow areas. And I don't know if they like that warm water because it's so
Oh, they
low.
do.
Oh yeah, they love warm water.
Yeah.
That's why they're going up onto it. That's really why they're in San Gabriel, is because of those warm power plant outflows. That's
Yeah.
kind of that's the way to see sea turtles. That's how I saw some yesterday on my way home. Is I just parked my car right next to the entrance of the bike path next to the power plant. And just wherever you see the kind of plume of effluent coming off the plant, there are turtles there. And we saw 2 in 15 minutes.
It's like a future field trip for OC habitats.
Well, and there's another opportunity here, diver, just go between these two sections of where the chimneys are out here. Go straight out, half mile is the outlet for the ones they're cooling. So if you're looking for warmer waters, she's saying she's going by the power plants, half
Well, I
mile
don't
out.
need to see, I'm just.
I'm just saying, if you're looking for an area, then there might be an area that
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you. You said there's another power plant somewhere that they may also be hanging out around this area.
Yeah, so Huntington Beach Wetlands Conservancy is literally a
Huntington.
couple 100 feet in front of the AES power plant in Huntington Beach.
So you.
The 4
definitely-
generators that are here are still using once-through cooling for one of the generators. So I was just saying that a half mile out is the outlet for the once-through cooling.
Half a mile out into the ocean.
Hmm.
Well, you know, their only predators besides humans are large sharks. And so you're very unlikely to see a green sea turtle half mile out in the ocean. But that doesn't mean that other species are not taking advantage of that. And that's a really interesting point that I will bring up to my advisors at NOAA at our meeting on Tuesday. Thank you so much for letting me know about that. That might be a fun thing to go out there and look for other species. Like we've been seeing a lot of olive Ridleys in the Orange County area, and we don't see them in San Diego. So maybe that's part of the reason why. I'm gonna make a note of that in my notebook. Thank you.
We are wrapping up, but we can maybe take one more question if anyone has one more question. Otherwise, I think we're gonna close it out. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for your presentation. I'm sorry you're not here. We would have loved to have seen you in person.
We'll see you
Um,
guys soon, I'm sure. I'll fix up my knee.
Yes, yes, get that knee fixed so we can see you in person next time.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day, you guys. Great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.